I distinctly remember being in London and watching the London Marathon in 2024, so last year. And there was a bunch of the guys that I trained with that were racing it. And on that day, I was like, I'm not missing this. I want to do this next year. And just completely committed to it after that.
Are you running a marathon? Oh my god, I could never run a marathon. You sure about that? My god, a marathon, that's like 42 kilometers, 26 miles. I don't understand those people. That used to be me.
But not anymore. Welcome to the Marathon Podcast. My name is Christian Warwick. Warwick runs on Instagram, YouTube, sometimes TikTok, not so much anymore. Thank you so much for being here, for tuning in on the last episode of 2026. I can't believe that the year is over. And I would say that this year has been a great success for the Marathon Podcast. I started this in March, and the other day I was out on a run and I was listening to the episode that I posted a couple of days ago, episode 100 of the Marathon Podcast, where I did a recap and I had some snippets or audio clips from the guests that have been on this year. And honestly, I was pretty proud of this podcast, proud to have had so many nice, good people on the podcast. And it just made me so happy. I usually listen to these episodes after, obviously, because I need to know that they came out well. But I rarely have the feeling that I had on Monday when I was running and just feeling like the year is kind of complete, that 100 episodes are behind me, and that the podcast is where it is today. I could never have dreamed about this back in March when I started it. So thank you for being a part of this journey. Thank you for listening. Before we dive into today's conversation, which is with Max Milarvie, I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm sorry, Max. I'm probably mispronouncing it. The second Scottish runner on the podcast. He is a 2:12 marathoner, and we're going to talk more about that. But before we do, I just want to touch on a couple of things. And one of them is my own training and working with Jonathan Green. I've actually received quite a lot of messages lately with people asking me how that training is going, how it is to be coached by John. If you're not familiar with John, you can head over to or go back and listen to one of the episodes with Jonathan Green. But in short, he is coaching Rory Linkletter, Philly Bowden. He is a very, very good coach. And I thought I would just say a little bit about how it has been working with him. Now I've been running consistently for a few weeks, and I would like to I think I would contribute the reason that I'm where I'm at running wise right now to John and his program. So we started working together pretty soon after I had him on the podcast. And back then I was sick, and we had several weeks of just kind of working together, but not being able to run because my lungs were not working. And so the way that John was, following me up and making sure I was good and making a plan for us to get back to where we wanted to be and where my ambitions were, that was very nice. Obviously, it kind of didn't feel like I needed a coach at the time because I wasn't really running. But looking back, I think it was so important. And it's been so nice to have someone guiding me through a very difficult time in terms of training. And now after getting back, it's been a month and a half of consistent running and several 100K weeks, great workouts, great progress. I have to say that it's easy to trust John because he is always asking me how I'm feeling. We have check-ins. We are using a software which makes it super easy for us to I give comments after all of my trainings, and he will adjust the plan accordingly. And so I really appreciate this. It's worked really well for me so far. Obviously, it's hard to tell in terms of results because it's been a month and a half and I haven't raced yet. But I do feel stronger than I ever have felt before. And I guess that is a good sign. And so, just to take you through a little bit of what we are doing now, is that just like with most of the guests that I have on, the training consists of easy running and two workouts and then a long run. And so John is mainly focusing on time on feet when it comes to the long run. That is the focus, and that is also what I need right now. And then the other, like the two workouts, have been, some of them, usually the Tuesday one might be a little bit shorter than the Friday one. But then, say this week, where I told John that I'm starting to feel this mileage, or the increased mileage that we've had over the last 3 to 4 weeks. And I assume that is why I only have one workout this week. I also just flew into Boston, so there's going to be a bit of a jet lag, time difference. Those things are probably also playing a part into me only having one workout this week. But all in all, I feel like we are really doing the right things. And then he was telling me something very interesting the other day, which kind of reminded me a little bit about what Molly Bourne was talking about when she was on. And that's that I have great progress these days. I feel so good when running. Everything feels uh, like it feels so easy, and I have to be careful to not go too fast on my easy runs because my heart rate is low. I'm feeling good. And so what John was saying is that right now my endurance is probably almost a problem because I'm not strong enough to actually handle that kind of pace or that kind of load. But my lungs and my endurance is so it's getting back to such a high level that mechanically my body can't really follow or keep up with that. And so if you have experienced this yourself, like maybe you're coming from a sport where you can tell that your heart and your lungs and your capacity is so good, you might have experienced the same thing as I am kind of experiencing now, that everything feels super easy in training, but you can still tell that when you get back or during the week, you might feel a bit like that your knees are tired, whatever. So right now, I do not have any injuries, or I wouldn't even call them niggles, but I can feel that the mechanical load is a bit higher. So that is something that we're also taking into consideration now with the training. I also really appreciate how positive John is. He makes it easy for me to believe him when he tells me that he thinks that we're doing the right things and that we're on the right track. But I also really appreciate that because I need someone to believe in me. And that is maybe also one of the things that I really appreciate about having a coach now, someone who can see my training, know what I'm doing, and still tell me that there is a lot of potential there. And so now, after having been coached by him for a couple of months, I've tried to kind of reflect on what is it that I like about being coached compared to being self-coached like I was before. And I come to the conclusion that for me, one of the main things, or the best things, first of all, is like the commitment. I am more committed to doing the job or putting in the work when I have a coach. The other thing that might be actually the most important one is that I don't have to think. I go out for that run. I trust that John will make the right decisions. I obviously listen to my own body if I'm tired, but it's nice to not have to be in charge of all of those decisions that I used to be in charge of when I was self coached. So that is great. Obviously, also having someone like John who's so experienced, knows so much about training, about running, that helps a lot. And I can just kind of relax, lean back, and just do the job and trust that what we are doing will work in the end. So, that is a short little update on how things are going. I'm very excited about running these days, and it's super nice to have gotten to the point again where those easy runs, they do feel easy, and I can just keep on running and running, and the short easy runs are now like 15 to 20k, which is also a good feeling, because getting back from this cold or COVID that I had, 10k kind of started feeling pretty long, and it's nice to not feel like that anymore. And so after giving you this update, I guess it's time for me to just mention again that I now have a partnership with Strava, and that I'm very proud of that. Proud to partner up with some or a brand that I've been really, really enjoying for so many years. I've been a Strava member since 2014. I've had a subscription for years, and now you can get 20% off a subscription using the code Christian or hitting the link in the show notes. This is again a little bit of a thank you to you guys. I mentioned it in the intro here, but thanks for having, like, for being here and for tuning in 2025. Can't wait for 2026. Yeah, if you haven't already, please go listen to that recap episode that I posted 2 days ago. I think that is worth a listen, and that will also maybe make it easier for you to know which episodes you should go back and listen to if you haven't listened to all of them. Okay, so Max is a Scottish runner. I mentioned this previously. He did his first marathon in 2024 in Valencia, 2:17 marathon. So obviously a fast marathoner, now a 2:12 marathoner. And it was very interesting to hear about his journey from that first marathon to today. And we also, or I realized when we started talking, that we have a mutual passion or love for Tracksmith. And so we chatted a little bit about that and his favorite products. And yeah, overall, I think it was very nice to get to hear more about his training. It's always interesting, and I hope that that is why you're listening to this podcast. It's always interesting to hear the training, hear the philosophy behind those good results that we see on social media or after a race. So I think that Max can take us through this episode better than I can, or I'll help out as good as I can. And I hope that you are enjoying your run, whatever you are doing, listening to this. And yeah, have a good time with this episode with Max. Almost straight from Valencia. Max, welcome to the Marathon Podcast. How are you?
Thanks. Yeah, no, great to be here. I am doing well, recovering.
Yeah, how is the body?
Honestly, I think compared to the previous couple that I've done, it's in a better state than it's been beforehand. I'm getting round. I'm obviously still a fair bit cooked, but yeah, recovering, doing a bit of jogging, just enjoying it. I'll enjoy the downtime for a few more weeks.
Yeah, 2:12. That is fast.
Yeah, I think I just had a great day at the office and managed to execute bang on what I thought the plan was going to be. So yeah, I'm buzzing. Still really excited about it.
Yeah, did you expect to run that fast?
I mean, I think going into it, like the day itself, I think that was pretty much bang on what the plan was. It's hard to say, you get pretty one-minded going into some of the big days around marathons. I find that, yeah, I definitely went in to try and run 2:12. I think it's rare that those days go completely to plan. So I was just really excited. That was my A goal, and I hit it. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, we're going to talk more about Valencia and the performance there. But before we do, I would love for you to just present yourself. You have a pretty big presence online with a lot of content out there, and you're a fast runner. So why don't you present yourself both as a runner, but also outside of running?
Sure. So I guess running wise, I'm based in London. I train with the Cottage Group down here. I'm coached by my coach back home, Mark Pollard. And I've grown up running. I started when I was maybe like 12 or 13 with my school cross country team. I joined my local club, and then carried it through at university in Edinburgh. Made it to the US at Boise State in the NCAA, And then, yes, I've carried through and started marathon running since I left college. And been based in London. Outside of running, I work full time. I'm a process engineer. I work in like the energy industry. And then, yeah, I think content wise, I've been really lucky. One of my mates down here, Connell, he's great with a camera, and he's pretty speedy. So he runs alongside and films. And yeah, we're trying to make a couple videos. We've got a YouTube channel called Chasing Pace, where we've covered a couple of the yeah, behind the scenes sort of stuff that I've been doing in training. And then yeah, no, I yeah, running is a massive part of my life, and it's cool to juggle it with other things too.
Yeah, I've always find it very interesting when talking to people like yourself, because you have a full-time job as an engineer, and you're a 212 marathoner, and I also know that you are a pretty like high mileage guy, right?
Yeah, I'd say so. I find that like it's funny. I think around work, running is like my most enjoyable part of the day a lot of the time. Where I look forward to training, I look forward to closing my laptop at the end of the day and getting out and chasing some miles. And I think it's a great balance to have. I've obviously had periods where it's been my sole focus, I guess, in college in the States, and I've done training camps and things, and I think that it really is quite a good thing to have another thing going on in your life sometimes, and running not always being the main focus and being able to switch off to. And I guess with like, yeah, my mileage has kind of grown over time. I don't run crazy miles. There's some of the guys I train with are, yeah, putting me to shame. But I guess, yeah, it's a lot to fit in, and I guess there's like some element of sacrifice in there too. But I quite enjoy it, so it doesn't feel like too much sacrifice.
Yeah. No, we're gonna get back to that, because I did see that you had like one day where you had 37K or something of double threshold, and I just noticed that you had some pretty crazy workouts there in this build. But before we dive into all of that, I'm curious to hear about how you found running in the first place and what that running journey has been like.
So when I'd started training at school, I made my school cross country team, and the guys that were in my year were really, really good. So I think, at age like 12 or 13 or something, the school team had won Scottish schools cross country, which it was like a massive deal at the time. And I made the team, and I was like, oh, I better start training. I better be good when I go and race. And I initially like just went to my local club. My local club was Victoria Park in Glasgow, and they have some like fantastic athletes, and you were surrounded by people that trained pretty hard, and the coaching setup was like great as a junior athlete. And I raced like, junior cross country and 800s and 1500s and things through the age groups. And then, yeah, over time, I guess, developed and always looked a little bit longer. So I think I'd benefited as soon as, cross country distances got a bit longer. And once you could start racing 3Ks, I enjoyed that. And then, yeah, gradually built up. But yeah, I think the main thing was I was surrounded by people that really enjoyed running. And, I had good role models at the club that I trained at. So there was people like Beth Potter and Mark Austin that, yeah, you could see like true success in the athletics world. That it was just crazy to see. And I think it set your sights pretty high in the running world.
But was it also running that led you to the US because did you do college there?
Yeah. So initially, when I left Glasgow, I did my undergrad degree in Edinburgh. And that's when I joined the group that I trained with there, and joined my current coach, Mark Pollard. So I think I made, at the time, I think during my high school time, I wasn't quite ready to go to the States. I don't think my times had been at a stage where I would have got a scholarship for a Division 1 school maybe. But yeah, I really enjoyed my time in Edinburgh and trained pretty hard, and I think that worked out quite nicely. And there was a few guys that I'd met there that ended up in the NCAA at Boise State. And, I had a couple words, and I emailed some of the coaches, and yeah, I managed to get a scholarship to Boise and spent 2 years out there, lots of my time. I didn't run kind of amazingly. The NCAA is so tough. I think for many people it's kind of make or break.
Mhm.
And for me, it wasn't make or break, but I guess, you go there with high hopes and, potentially looking at breaking through. And that didn't happen for me, but I still quite enjoyed, traveling about, racing, it's crazy. Like it's just so high performance. And then yeah, since I had left the States, I moved over here, moved back home.
Because there's like one thing that I feel like I hear a lot, especially when Europeans or like I've talked to like your fellow countryman Ryan Thompson, who also went to the US, and
Yeah,
he didn't really do that well over there. And several people I've talked to, they say that it seems, or that it's really hard. Like you said, it's very competitive, the performance focus, and a great experience. Most of you guys, you come back and you run faster when you come back eventually, but that you don't necessarily have the best performances over there. How was that for you in terms of, getting used to that? Was it very different from what you were used to back home?
I think you go from at least racing in Scotland and in the UK. There's just way more like guys racing at a high level in the States, just purely by numbers. And so you go into big races,
Yeah.
and maybe in the UK we've been finishing top 50, top 30, top 10. That same number in the States is like top 200, top 100. And that, like, confidence
Yeah.
wise is really difficult. Like, honestly, you go into these races and you're like, oh, if I finish top 100 today, I've actually had quite a good race. And I think at times the season's really difficult. So you go through the cross country season in the NCAA is quite compact. And so you need to go in and be firing straight away. And if you don't have great days, then yeah, you're not losing 10 spots, you're losing 100. And then you're going into the next race, like, not right on top of it. And I think that side of it's really quite difficult. Um, but I think generally, like, the NCAA just now is such a good place to be training and racing. And I think I responded to the training out there clearly. Like, I did 2 years of pretty hard work. And I think I'm probably seeing the fruits of that now, albeit at the time the racing just didn't come together.
Yeah, because what year was it that you were in the US?
So I was there 2021 till 2023. So 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And now, like doing that marathon that you did, I know that is it like the 11th best time of a Scottish runner ever?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Which I,
Yeah.
I
So
was
that means
excited
that
about.
yeah, no, that's very impressive. You're at a very high level. When you like left the US to go back home, were you kind of like ready to get into those kind of performances, those results? Did you want to go all in with running, or were you kind of like, okay, now I'm done with college, time to get a job and just a normal life? Where were you at?
I think it's difficult because I definitely wasn't like ultra motivated post being in the States. I think you race 5Ks, 10Ks on the track out there, and I've still not ran under 14 minutes. I've not run under 29 minutes, and they were like big targets that I'd had while being out there, and they were the sort of times that get you to regionals, and then you can look beyond to nationals and things. And I obviously didn't achieve that while I was out there. And you work hard, and you're kind of you set your goals on those sorts of things. And I think it was nice to come back to the UK and race. Kind of the racing scene here is very different, and a lot of the kind of high pressure, high stakes races in the States are like tend to not be enjoyable experiences if they don't go well. If they go well, they're amazing. Like, you can't beat it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
But I came back here and
Yeah.
raced like local cross country leagues and really enjoyed it. And then I joined the group that I joined, the just environment for training. Immediately, I've like just clicked with. And I think as soon as you've got a group of people around you that like lift up like performance, and I think it was nice to have fresh challenges as well. So looking towards the roads and looking at half marathons and marathons, that massively refreshed me. And then yeah, I still did look at racing on the track, and I think the scene here is pretty easy to jump out on a weekday after work and do a 3K at like a local BMC. There's just so much going on, and I think it didn't take me long to fall back in love with training and racing. But it was really nice to just have like a new racing scene and a new stimulus too.
No, it's interesting to hear, and I think that also something that you touched on in terms of that confidence that you might like get or lose by going somewhere else. I remember my dad's old coach, he used to tell the athletes when they were not performing well, he said like, go home and do some local races now. just because he knew that that would kind of just boost their confidence, right? Like they were out there competing in like internationally, and they knew that okay, it's not going so well because there are such a good competition out there. And then when you go back to your like small town and you race there, then obviously you're gonna do well regardless of your performances, right? And
Yeah,
it sounds like that's kind of what you're saying as well, like coming back and finding the joy and then start competing again and building that confidence. Obviously there's also like a high level, like there are a lot of good racers in London as well, but like you said, in the US it might be very different.
I think it's just so easy to get lost in some of the big races. And yeah, absolutely. Like running, your local cross country leagues, or even like, the bigger races, whether it's nationals or Liverpool cross country. You can go to these races and just be really like, I think having a group of guys that you train with and then you can be competitive with is great. Where at least in Boise, our team we were really good, but I found it difficult with just getting lost in some of the races out there. And it wasn't an experience that everyone had.
Yeah.
Obviously, for different guys, it can be amazing, and they really kick on from that. But yeah, that was my experience anyway.
Yeah. So you got home from the US. Were you then like done with college and everything? So you were already an engineer, or did you have to keep studying when you got back to
No,
Glasgow?
once
Or
I
did
got
you
back,
go back to Scotland first, or did you go directly to London?
no. So my girlfriend lived in London at the time, so I was looking for jobs over here, and yeah, I moved and started
Mm-hmm.
work straight away. It was kind of a bit like one of the main reason why I moved here and looked for work over here. So
Yeah.
yeah, been here since then and working. Yeah.
But were you very ready to go into that kind of life when you were done with college in the US, or did you feel like you wanted to still go full time running? What was that like?
To be honest, I think I'd done 4 years in Edinburgh and then 2 in Boise, and so I'd spent a decent amount of time studying, and I think it, maybe about time that I'd started working. Yeah, I think I was ready, and it's nice once you start like having adult money and you're not living like a student anymore. Yeah, I think I
Yeah.
was ready.
Yeah.
Yeah, beyond just running side of things, I think at a certain point you need to be realistic with what's going on, and I think I definitely figured out, maybe before I was in Boise, but for sure after that at the time I wasn't ready to do anything more in terms of look for contracts or anything like that. So yeah, at that point I was like, yeah, need to grow up a little bit here.
Yeah. But then comes the question, because now I guess you came home then 2.5 years ago,
Yeah.
and you've been working for a couple of years. Now you're a very fast marathoner, and like you're starting to get to the point where I'm I don't know if you're thinking about it, but at least for me from the outside, I'm like, well, maybe there's a potential there to like do find a way to do this full time. Is that something that you want to do? And I'm talking about the running.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's difficult. Like I've not had anything come up, and I still think I'm a decent jump off where I'd need to be to make like a decent living from it. Obviously, if opportunities like that come up, it's difficult to say no because you've got quite a short window for when you can be a competitive athlete. I guess I'd need to wait until something like that came around to really weigh it up. But I think you can see guys like Phil Sessman had like a cool transition from being a full-time doctor and then reduced his days, and it was kind of a progressive thing. As as he got better, it made more sense to take more time off, and so maybe I think that's maybe the smartest way to do it. But yeah, the way that I see it is, I still think I've made the jump that I've made in the past couple of years, juggling and doing what I'm doing. So I'm not in a rush to quit the day job, and I do actually quite enjoy having both. And so as much as like if the opportunity comes up, yeah, maybe it'd be cool. But I think there's more to it than just having all the time in the world to recover and rest
Yeah.
between sessions and things. I honestly think at times it's a positive to have both.
Yeah. No, that's what I hear from a lot of people, that like, because I usually ask this question, right? And then I get different answers. Some people are like, yes, that's like, I want that 100%. And then there are some people who are like, I don't, think that would suit me so well because it would just not really work and you get too obsessed with running. And I think that is kind of the biggest problem for athletes in general. Some athletes work very well with that full-time athlete lifestyle. Go out, work out, watch Netflix in between, and then you go out for another workout, like do those things. And then you have those who just really need to work, need to study. I actually heard about, I was listening to Life in Stride, another running podcast, and they were talking about how during just before I think the Chicago Marathon, a lot of the professional runners, because they're also coaches, they were sitting there writing training plans very close up until a race. So you would maybe think that professional runners would sit, relax, not do anything, but they were actually working, which is it's fun to hear that that's the way they're preparing.
I guess it's one of them as well where it having a pretty flexible setup by being something like an online coach is quite a nice complementary thing to being an elite runner.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's if it came around, I think it'd be cool. I think I don't always envy the lifestyle because I think the pressure around big events must be so crazy, and something that managing that, particularly if you're not right at the very top. I think if you're, a professional athlete and not making teams, I think that cycle must be really difficult at times. And having a different source of income must help at times too.
Yeah, I think so. But then you got home from the US, started working, found this running group, and it's only 2 years since that. So when did you find the marathon and realize that this is something that I want to do?
So I think I'd kind of always thought that I would be a marathon runner. But I distinctly remember being in London and watching the London Marathon in 2024, so last year. And there was a bunch of the guys that I trained with that were racing it. And on that day, I was like, I'm not missing this. I want to do this next year. And just completely committed to it after that. So I think London was April, and then I signed up for Valencia in the December. And yeah, since then I've done 3 back to back and enjoyed the routine of it. So the group was already
Valencia
there.
was your first one?
Yeah.
Didn't
Valencia
you run
was my
2:17 in Valencia?
Yeah. So I enjoy. Yeah, I think I had a pretty positive debut. In terms of even the experience of the race last year was great. I still had quite a lot go wrong. I had to stop to, I had a couple of stomach problems, and then I'd had a lot of gels, and as I crossed the line, I threw all my gels back up again. It was just Morton. And then but bar that, I think pace wise and form wise, I kind of always thought I was going to be suited to it, and I think that day I was like, yeah, this is definitely my thing. And then I rolled straight into London after Valencia, and that was a more difficult day. Despite the experience just being crazy and all that I had built it up to be from watching the year before. I loved it, but I really hated that last 10K.
Can you first, if we first talk about that first marathon block to Valencia, because Valencia 2:17 and then 2:22 in London, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And then now you're at 2:12. And now
Yeah.
you're at 2:12. So it means that you've had 2 marathons that went really well. And I wouldn't say that 2:22 is bad, but it also sounds, based on what you just said, that London wasn't really the best day. And so if we take the first one, Valencia 2024, and that block, your first ever marathon block, what was that like? And how was that different from things that you've done before that?
So I think starting the marathon training in London, I bumped my mileage up a bit. Compared to what I'd been on kind of over the summer. And I'd had a reasonable summer. I'd ran fairly well on the track. I PB'd over 5K by 0.5 of a second or something. And that had been a PB that I'd ran before I'd gone to America. And so I rolled off like a decent track season and kind of running fairly well, albeit off somewhat lower mileage than I'd been on before. Like I wasn't running over 100 or anything like that. And as soon as I hit the block, I seemed to like just click with the routine of, running a decent bit around work and like the sessions with the group, and everything seemed to go quite well. But the block that I did for Valencia last year was the same essentially as what I did going into London, and then it's the same block that I've done this past, few months. And I think I've just found that the way that it's set up, and it's quite periodized, where I do like it's a 16-week block with kind of 8 weeks of fairly controlled, steady running at the start, and then into a kind of more specific marathon tail end for the last 8 weeks. Obviously with a taper in there as well. And I just seemed to click with it. There was obviously times where I'd raced through like the block or, had hard efforts, and I think I've been pretty cooked through all 3 of the blocks that I've done. There's been points where I've been pretty tired or, just like beaten up or whatever, like, and then come to race day and I think I've tapered down and it's managed to go quite well. Looking particularly at Valencia in 2024, I think I just came into it having had like a nice summer, feeling pretty positive. And I just really enjoyed those long sessions. They were obviously things that I'd not done before. So, your kind of 5x5K or 3x10K. I just responded well and enjoyed it. And the fueling side of things never seemed to be an issue. And all the kind of major marathon pieces that, like, I don't know, can be quite difficult or new, I quite enjoyed that. I did have a couple issues in that block. So I was out running, I think it was 3 or 4 weeks before the race, and I don't know what I did to my knee, but I got home and it was a bit sore. And then I started a session the Saturday morning, which was the day after this run. And after like a couple of Ks, I was like, "Oh, I'm not good here." And my knee was just fully like inflamed and pretty swollen. And I was like, "Oh no, I'm not going to make it here. Like I'm done. I might need a bit of time off, whatever." And so I think like 4 weeks out from the race, I had a week of like pretty much no running. I swam a couple of days after, and then I think I'd just responded quite well to a bit of rest. I did miss what is usually my kind of key marathon finding session. So a few weeks out, I do like a 35K pretty hard. I guess like marathon pace run. And I've done that in the other 2 blocks, and I missed that in this one. And I think going into my first marathon and missing that kind of key finder, it makes it difficult to go into the race and know exactly what you're capable of or what you can and can't do. I'd obviously had big sessions and other ones that had gone well, and I think I was in a good spot. But without having that, specific one that you go, well, I know I can run this for 35K. I'll hopefully survive on the day. It's hard to know where I was, and so I went into it and I had quite a conservative approach going into Valencia. Like planned it out with my coach and everything, and we'd said that we'll keep controlled through halfway. Valencia is such a perfect course, and it's pretty nice to you because the last 5Ks downhill, and if things do go wrong, you have a little buffer that I think other marathons don't quite have. And so I think on the day I ran a lot of it with one of the guys that I'd been training with in London, Hugo. And so we ran a bunch of it together, and I got to 14, 15 miles and felt great. And then, moved through and caught a couple of the guys that had been up the road ahead of me. And I just remember really enjoying it. Bar the fueling went pretty poorly that day, but generally everything else pretty positive experience. And I was like, I'm built for this. I love it.
Awesome. And what was your peak mileage for that block? And has that also been the same?
I think it was over 100. It was maybe 110. I don't think it was anything crazy, but I can't remember if I was double sessioning in that block. I don't think I did too many double sessions. And then I tend to only do single days. So I think the weeks that were pretty big were done pretty much all in single runs. So yeah, I think I'd have to look back, but around maybe 105, 110.
Yeah. Okay, so then you are done with your first marathon, and we're going to get into more of the specifics of your training. And somewhere in here, and it could be that that was before your marathon, you also signed with Tracksmith, right? Like this is something that I'm very passionate about. We're both sitting here with Tracksmith t-shirts on, and you have the poster behind you. I have some actually,
Yeah.
some some things hanging behind me here. And yeah, can you say something about how that happened and when that happened? Because if I'm right, it happened just before the marathon, or like before that marathon block, right?
Yeah, so there's a league race around London called the Surrey League, and Tracksmith were the sponsors of it. The first year that I competed at it. And over the course, there's 4 meets throughout the year, and I finished second and third in all 4 and managed to win it overall. And by winning overall, I got onto the athlete support program with Tracksmith. So I think I started in the summer of 2024, and then yeah, I've been on that since.
And I don't usually talk about products on the podcast, but I've gotten so passionate about Tracksmith myself. I had the CEO Matt Taylor on the podcast a few months ago, and after he kind of just explained the values and how the company works, I just like ended up buying way too much stuff, and I really enjoyed the products myself. And I find it to be very interesting because it's such a combination and balance of performance and just really cool, like this New
Yeah.
England prep style. For you as an athlete, and obviously the listeners need to remember that you've been signed with them, but you also told me that you don't really know what's happening going forward. So you're not like fully sponsored, I guess. So I guess what you're saying can be actually your opinions regardless of that sponsorship. But what has it how has it been for you to run with Tracksmith, and what has that yeah, how has it been?
It's been great. I mean, even to have like the side of recognition and support from a brand's really cool. And I think, we're lucky that when you do go out and race in the Tracksmith kit, it's great stuff. I'm obviously, I race the marathon in their shorts all the time. I wore their kit, when I can. And they do really cool events and sponsor cool things around London. Like, I think getting involved in the Surrey League is really cool. I raced like road, like crypt circuit race during summer this year, and they just put on cool events, and the people involved have been great. So yeah, I've only got good things to say about them, and it helps that when you go and race, you're in ultra high quality kit, and it feels good to wear their stuff.
Yeah, that's the thing that I've found as well, that I think I've gone from like, oh, I want this because it looks cool, to being a bit more like, I want that quality, things that will last. And then I realized now, because this is the first time that I've really bought winter outfits, or like merino wool items
Yeah,
from Tracksmith, because usually I've been just wearing some cross country skiing stuff when I've been out running in the cold. And I bought this sweater like a few weeks ago, and I've been wearing it for all of my runs, like workouts, easy runs, all of it. And first of all, it doesn't smell, so I don't need to really wash it. And it's just feels so good. And I feel like I'm performing in it, although that's definitely not an item that I would have bought previously to kind of run in. I would be like, yeah, that's a nice one, but I would never think about running in it. So that's like my favorite item right now. What is your favorite item from them, or piece of
I like
clothing?
all of this Strata stuff. I think is great. So the marathon shorts I think are like top tier. I'm particularly I've never had bottles in a race. And so they've got all the pockets that you could need for gels. And I think that, yeah, on the marathon side of things, that's great. I've got a couple of their long sleeves that I really like as in, as you say, the quality is just, yeah, pretty good. And I think the kind of European winters can be kind of chilly, and they're quite
Yeah,
nice. The flexibility of having, yeah, nice merino wool long sleeve it keeps you toasty. It's good.
cool. people are probably like, oh, now this podcast is sponsored by Tracksmith. It's not. I'm just very passionate about it. But yeah, I think that it's cool to hear. And when I saw that you were wearing the Tracksmith gear at first, I was like, oh, cool, then we can talk Tracksmith. And then I saw that you were signed with them, and I was like, oh, that's even cooler. We're gonna get back to the chat about your build. You were saying that you've been doing the same kind of thing for London. Before we go into the specifics, because we can go through the specifics for when we talk about the Valencia block for this one, uh, were there any things that were different going into London, or was it just a bad day that kind of led to uh, a bit of a slower marathon? But I'm not sure if like 222, 217, Valencia is a very fast course, London obviously too, but there could be other things than just you affecting that result, I guess.
Honestly, I went into London like hoping for, I don't know, somewhere between 217 and 212. If you were to look at it kind of between the two performances that I've done now, I think London as a race, I was just so excited for it. The training block had gone great. And on the day, I think a lot of people suffered with the heat. I think, maybe I'd gone into it like overly optimistic a little bit. I guess that can happen. And the margins are pretty fine. And yeah, I think it wasn't what I was hoping for on the day. And particularly when there's like a lot of people that out watching, and you've sunk 4 months into a training block for a day to not go great. It was definitely tough. As a race, it's amazing. Like, I think the experience of racing London was cool. And that starts like weeks before. There was a good group of us racing it. Maybe 10, 15 guys. And we had the experience of running a bunch of that together. And there was the guys that did get it right on the day. I think there was only, maybe 5 or 10 guys that had like a really positive experience at London. So it wasn't as if I was the only one that had, a less optimal day at the office. I think that made me feel a little bit better about it myself. But generally, I think I knew I was capable of more than what I had on the day. Even until it went kind of wrong, I had like a really good experience through 20 miles. And I think time-wise, what I'd split, how it was going, I was really happy. And so generally, I didn't come out of London disappointed or kind of disheartened with how I was in fitness and shape and how the block had gone. It was just that the day that the race was on wasn't, perfect. But I think that's one of the hard parts about a marathon is you pick a random day 100 days in the future and go, yeah, I want to have perfect weather. I want to feel amazing. And I want my race to just go to plan. And that can't always happen.
Yeah. I've thought a lot about this because, especially when I did Boston this spring, I obviously kept visualizing and picturing how the race would go. And I do feel like the one thing that I have the most control of is obviously like how, like my shape or how I'm going into it. Obviously you have injuries and all of that, but I can know that, okay, I'm going to do this. If this happens, I'm going to take it a bit easier there. I'm going to wait for the hills, all of that. But I was always picturing great weather. And I know that in Boston, that's not the case. Like, it's such with that course, if you have tailwind, headwind, like, you never know. But if you have one of them, you will have it the whole way. And like, if you look at 2018, it was pouring down and it's like 32 Fahrenheit. Like, it's so cold, so wet. And I was picturing it as like a perfect cold summer day. And so what you're saying there, I think, is something that people need to remember, that everyone is facing the same thing. And I also feel like maybe with the marathons, we tend to talk about the times because obviously a PR and a PB, it's fun. But sometimes, or with the marathon, every course is different. Every day is different. You can't really just see it as like, oh, I ran a PR on that day. That is the same as me running a PR the other day. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's way more to some of them than what the clock says at the end of the race. And I think the Boston one you're talking about, I think that's the Yuki Kawauchi race. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's like historic that he just went and, you know, his PB's 10 minutes slower than some of the guys, or maybe 6 minutes slower than some of the guys that he's racing against, and he puts them all away.
I love the because when they were commenting on it, they said, "Oh, he will have to like carry a piano at the end of this race because he's," and they said that, and then they said, "Here's someone who wants like a few minutes of fame," just like really making fun of him for going at it, and then he wins, and I think it just makes it even better.
He's like a cult hero for it. It's so cool. And there's like a little part of
Okay.
me that loves the idea of like a race, one of the major marathons being like horrendous weather, and yeah, going into it and not being scared of a bit of rain or a bit of wind, and somewhat sticking to a plan and actually just racing the guys in the course rather than racing the clock. I think it's really cool.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think that there's also a part of me, and especially like coming from Norway, where that is what I face most of the time when I'm out running, right? Then it would just feel more at home, and you would just have to. I think that you still have to adjust and be like, okay, so now I have to adjust to the shitty weather that I'm used to, rather than the perfect conditions. But I do agree with you. I also feel like there's a part of me. I don't know how big part of me wants it, but a little part of me wants it.
Yeah, only a tiny bit. As you say, the like
Yeah.
adjustment piece. I think that was part of what went wrong at London, is that I think it was the first kind of warmer day of the year that we'd had, and I was like pretty far off any sort of heat preparation or anything that, you know, I think is quite popular just now. And like we were stood in the starting pen, and there was a bit of, you know, whispers around, are people planning on changing their racing plan? Are you going to account for the heat? And I decided not to. And I don't think
Mhm.
realistically I probably should have. It's so difficult at the time when you've got a plan and, you know, you've stuck a decent amount of training into trying to run a time that you put a fair bit of value on. And so, as you say, having maybe a sense check and changing that plan is probably the best thing to do. But it's so difficult to do in the moment.
Definitely. But I also feel like what you said before, it's it does sound like you were able to enjoy that experience, which I think is very good, and people should listen to this. That you are not necessarily running the race you wanted time wise, but you're still enjoying that race, the time you had on the course. And you don't really hear that a lot. I feel like people usually talk about, oh no, it was a shitty day because I didn't, I got tired. It wasn't my day. But you are able to focus on that. Is that something like as an athlete that you are also good at, to have that focus, or was it because your mates also kind of struggled a bit, so you saw that that was something that everyone was facing?
I I don't think I'm like particularly different in terms of seeing the positives of like tough days, but London, I just try and forget about whatever happened after 20 miles that day, because the first 20 were amazing and the last 6 were like, you know, tunnel vision, and I just want this experience to be over now. I'm I guess I've had plenty races that have not gone well or to plan. I guess one of the ones, like one of the most recent ones, was my 5K in summer, just at the beginning of my block going into this Valencia, and I didn't enjoy the like race as a whole, but I think the experience of getting out and racing generally is pretty positive, and I think, you know, regardless of how it goes, a lot of the time you catch up with people that you don't see very often. You put yourself in a cave, and sometimes that goes well, and sometimes it doesn't. That's kind of part of the game. I think in terms of seeing the positives of it, it's difficult sometimes when it does go poorly, but I generally trust that at some point it'll hopefully get a bit better. Um, and yeah, just straight on to the next one.
Yeah. Okay, so straight on to the next one, Valencia. Seems like it must have been a pretty good block. You did mention that you are being coached. How much influence do you have on like the training and the training plan and the block itself when it comes to those things?
So my coach sets everything that I do running wise. I guess we have like pretty frequent check-ins with how I'm feeling and if we need to adjust anything, if I'm like tired or if other things are going on. But generally, he tells me what to do, and I have a lot of trust in everything that he said, which I think works. I think I sometimes do respond well to just having a plan and sticking to it.
Cool. So will you take us through this marathon block? Because I assume that a normal week was like usually a normal week. So, or I don't know how much that varied from week to week, but just take us through the basics of it, and then we can go into the specifics later.
Sure. So a normal week was I'd have 2 hard days. So my hard days generally are Tuesday and Saturday. At least in this Valencia block, the Tuesday would be a double session. So I would do some sort of morning threshold, usually like 3x8 minutes or something like that. And then in the evening, I would join the cottage group and do what they were doing, which tends to be some sort of maybe 10K to half marathon type interval session. I'm around Battersea Park. And then on Saturday would be my longer marathon session, which would be anything from, 20K volume, kind of, again, interval-y sort of stuff, or longer steady I'm running. So 32K up to maybe 45K, I think was my longest one this block.
Wow.
A decent bit slower than marathon pace, but a reasonable intensity. So you're running for 2.5, 2 hours 45. And then around those 2 hard days, everything was easy. So I would just run once a day, maybe 60 to 90 minutes most days. And I tend to not take a day off unless I kind of feel a need to.
And so on that Tuesday, for instance, you did your threshold workout in the morning. Are you then doing like lactate and making sure that you are on the right intensity, or do you just know that this is threshold and you stick to that?
I don't measure it lactate. I do wear my heart rate monitor, and I think I'm fairly dialed in to what like the perceived effort feels like. That varied quite a lot week on week. I wasn't afraid for that pace to be 10 seconds, 15 seconds slower some weeks than others, and I think that just varied with how tired I was feeling through the block. And my heart rate tended to reflect that. But yeah, generally I would just do it on effort. And I don't think I attach the ego to the pace of those sessions. I'm 100% guilty of it on other sessions, but at least on the morning threshold stuff, I find that, yeah, there's a good reason to stay controlled and to not get carried away.
And I like to ask some of the athletes about this because, especially for people who are not experienced with threshold, like they think of that as a hard workout. And then it can be hard sometimes to understand what is it supposed to feel like. So if you were to kind of explain or describe that feeling that you have on those workouts, and I guess like that is also the reason why it's slower some days, right? Because you're not pushing it. It doesn't mean that you're not able to. It's just that you're choosing not to because you don't want to push it that much. So what does it feel like for you?
I guess most of the time it's the idea that the intensity of it is like, I guess maybe a 6 or a 7 out of 10. And that if someone ran past you and was running a decent bit faster, maybe you could cover it for a few hundred meters and then you'd want to slow back down again. I think the actual feeling of it is that you're running controlled but fast. I find it's a difficult kind of sensation to describe. I think sometimes it is like quite a nice and flowy feeling, but other times it's not. Other times, you kind of know that you're beginning to work a little bit because obviously you are beginning to kind of move a bit faster. I guess it's somewhere in that range of, yeah, some days it is like a quite nice and, relaxed, controlled effort. And other days, that feeling is the same internally, but you're not moving as fast, so that's okay.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. I appreciate that. That's like the same. I have the same. If I was to describe it, I would probably explain it or describe it the same way. But it's always interesting to hear that, and I don't think we can hear that enough in a way because it's so uh, with marathon training, and I'm curious to hear your take on this. That it seems kind of like boring because you're never really testing yourself. You're never like going that hard. And it's just all about getting to the start line and not feel like you've done too much too hard almost.
Yeah, I think riding the line through marathon training can be quite difficult. I'm particularly as you get towards race day, you're obviously beginning to do some of the kind of specific sessions and things like that. And, you know, you kind of you have an idea as you go into these specific ones of what race pace might be. But unless you've raced through the block or kind of have a decent amount of experience, it's hard to know exactly where that line is. The 35k session that I'd mentioned earlier, I think is a nice range finder for what you're going to do on the day. But even going into that one, I like when I did that one about a month ago now, it felt like a race day. I was more nervous than I'd been going into like a good number of races for a session that is a few weeks out from a marathon. Because you know that you're going into it somewhat blind to what that pace is actually going to feel like once you're 25, 30k deep. There's obviously value in doing those sorts of sessions, but other times, you know, you have a plan and you hope it works out.
Yeah. And I'm gonna ask you more about that long run because I'm kind of obsessed with that long run and how those workouts are. But that second threshold workout that you have on that Tuesday, you said that you're doing it with the team or your group. Uh, are you then still at the same intensity threshold wise, or is that more like I'm going with the group? So then, yeah,
Yeah, I try and keep it somewhat under control, but I'm definitely guilty sometimes of getting pretty carried away and just going a bit too hard. I think it tends to be around maybe half marathon sort of pace down to sometimes 10k sort of pace. So definitely above threshold type stuff, and maybe towards the like VO2 end of things. I'm generally those sorts of ones. I find it really enjoyable to be out training with a group, and I think had those sessions been flipped the other way around, with the like interval session in the morning and the threshold in the evening, I'd find it a lot more difficult. But I look forward to that one, and so I find that when you're surrounded with the guys, it's pretty easy to get fired up and feel excited about getting a good session in.
So are those workouts usually a bit shorter in the intervals or the repeats than the morning threshold workout?
It changes every week. So the coach, Mark, he sets it for effectively the group's got people racing from kind of 1500 up to the marathon. And particularly this year, there's been guys that have, performed really well over the shorter stuff and really well over the longer stuff. And so it's a session that fits everyone. And I think there's a lot of value in training systems that if you're a marathon runner, you still need to be able to run at 10k pace. If you're a 1500 runner, you still need to be running at, the kind of longer stuff too. I guess generally the session is like a combination of laps of Battersea Park, whether it's, some weeks it's 3-minute reps, some weeks it's some like a lap tempo and then some shorter reps. It changes every week, but I think that's kind of part of the enjoyment of it.
So is that the day that, because when I looked at your Instagram and I saw that you had like a 37-kilometer double day, was that like the day where you had that?
Yeah, I think the Tuesdays where I'd done a couple of the decent long ones, they would be the ones where I'd done a threshold in the morning and then the evening session. Towards like marathon day, I split off from the group sometimes and I'd do some longer marathon specific ones on a Tuesday. I think I only did that once or twice this block. And I think those days I ticked off some pretty like decent mileage numbers for like individual days. But yeah, generally I try where I can and where it works with the plan from my coach from home. We try and work it in that Tuesday session.
So what did those work like, those 1 to 2 times that you ended up doing that by yourself? What kind of workouts did you have in the afternoon then?
So one of them, I had a couple guys for company in the end. I had a few of the marathon boys in the group joined, and we did like 8K, 6K, 5K or something. I think we didn't complete that session in the end, actually. I think we just did 8K, then 6K. So kind of like a broken tempo type thing. Um, I remember feeling pretty tired after that one, and we cut it a little bit short.
Yeah, that was my question. How did you feel after?
Yeah, so one of the guys that we were training with, Luke, Luke's really good. He's ran 2:11 for the marathon. So yeah, if when you're training and you're managing to keep up with him, you're doing quite well. And he was running fast that day. And I remember thinking, like, there's value in just sticking with the pace here. And I like specific pace wise, I'm not sure what we ran. It was maybe, like 3:10s or something, maybe a little quicker for 8K and then similar for the 6K. And I was like, you know what, I got a threshold done this morning. I think I've done plenty here. But yeah, I think that's part of the value of the group. We've got, the marathon standings, like the guys this year at Valencia, we had guys I ran 2:12, Andy ran 2:13. We took like just from 2:12 up to 2:19, we had like 10 guys. You rock up on
Wow.
a Tuesday evening and there's a group of guys that are like really hammering it on the marathon side of things. And then we've got guys running sub 14 on the 5Ks and, 340 and 1500s. It's a real good group and a good scene to be part of.
Oh, that's really cool. But where did you in the block, if we, because say you did this 2 times during that block, where did you place those? Like, were they closer to the race or were they earlier in the block?
They were closer to the race. So I think it was when we were getting into like, one of them was a taper session. So one of them was that 6K, 8K. That was kind of maybe 6 weeks out. And then the second one was during the taper, which I think was, I actually also didn't complete that session. I think it seems to be that when I do them on my own in the evening, it's not as good. But that one was 12K steady, 5K pickup. And I'm supposed to do it twice. And I did the first one and then I did another like 6 or 8K steady and I called it a day. I didn't double that day, I don't think, because we were in the taper time.
Yeah. And so the rest of the runs that you did, you said that, like, except for that long run, it's usually easy running that you're just filling in there 60 to 90 minutes every day. Sometimes you're doubling, is that what you said?
No, I tend not to double. I try and
Okay.
just do
Yeah.
singles. Yeah.
Yeah. What not necessarily pace, but what kind of intensity is that easy, are those easy runs for you? Do you go super slow or is it kind of just still some pace there?
It honestly kind of changes every day. I think the days post sessions tend to be the ones where I'm a little more tired, and so they'll be a little slower sometimes. I get most of where I run in London is quite flat, so it somewhere around 7 to 8 minute miling. Sometimes it'll be a little bit quicker. We'll do a group run on a Sunday, and sometimes that one can get moving a little bit more just by virtue of having a good bunch of guys out. But yeah, generally I don't really look at the watch and just kind of switch off, put a podcast on and zone out as much as I can.
Sounds good. So with the long run, and I always ask about this, what it looks like, and you said that is usually kind of like a steady run, a bit slower than marathon pace. But is that then throughout the whole run, or do you have repeats or floats, whatever, in there?
No, well, I guess it depends on what stage of the block we're in. But at least the first kind of chunk of the block, I do a lot of steady, just long runs. Where it's just a consistent pace, kind of 3:45 a k, something like that. For 30 to 40k. Some of them a bit longer as we get towards the end of that kind of first stage of training. I seem to respond quite well to that sort of stuff. And then I guess towards the end of the block, once I'm getting nearer to the race, you hit quite big volumes in the Saturday sessions anyway. So I don't have, a conventional long run that I've had in other periods of training where, if you're racing other distances, I would have like a normal Sunday long run. I've had a little bit less of that since I've started marathon running.
And that long run that you talked about where you were almost just as nervous as before races, that was the 35k, was it?
I think we did 34 or something in the end, yeah.
Yeah. And did you then go marathon pace for that one? So like marathon pace but shorter than the marathon distance?
Yeah, so I think the plan was to basically, get pretty close to race effort and put the body in a place where we're going to find out if that's happening or not. So I had company. I did that one with Andy, so Andy Fife ran 2:13 for his debut marathon. Sort of a great guy to train with through the block. And we did, 35k just around Battersea Park and ran like 5-10 miling or something like that. So maybe a little bit off what we actually ran on the day. But yeah, definitely I was hurting after that one. Even towards the end of that kind of session, the last 3-4k, I was working pretty hard and suffering. And I think I gained confidence through doing that session, but definitely kind of had a little seed of doubt in my head after doing it of I think that day I couldn't have ran another, I don't know, chunk, another half an hour at that intensity. But after a few weeks of kind of coming back down and absorbing that training, when it actually got to race day, I was ready to string that together.
I don't know about you, but I also feel like if you're able to do that in training, there's just something extra that will show up on the day of the race. And you can probably just do the same thing or maybe even better when come race day.
Yeah, hopefully anyway. I think sometimes, especially protect. You said earlier, it's easy in marathon training to kind of not know where you are, or to be kind of a bit overcooked or whatever. And I think these sorts of efforts are the ones where it's really difficult to manage the recovery off the back of big training sessions. And so there's definitely a bit of art around how you taper and actually making sure that you can take that step up on race day. It's something that you always hope as a runner going into races that you can do, but there's no guarantee that you rise to what you hope you can on the day.
Exactly. And so when you're done with this, I assume that is at the end of the block or just before you start tapering. What does your tapering usually look like? So if we take the last 2 weeks, what changes?
So I guess I reduce volume a little bit, and my sessions also reduce in terms of overall volume. But I tend to go in to do a little bit kind of faster stuff, and maybe a touch on half marathon pace type intensity. I did a 3-week taper for all of the ones I've done, bar the first year at Valencia, where it kind of ended up being 4 weeks because of my knee. And I think that, to be honest, I've kind of been okay with the longer kind of extended period of reducing volume. I've always quite enjoyed going into race day and feeling as if you're just caged up and ready to go. And I think having not really ran a hard session in that amount of time, you kind of get that sensation of being really ready to go on race day. I do think that the actual session going into the race, it's nice to touch on some faster stuff and feel confident. And I think as you freshen up through that last couple of weeks, it's really nice to come into race day and feel pretty positive. I think pre-Valencia this year I did. I both years I've gone out a few days before, so I did a session on the riverbed, the kind of park in the middle of the city, and I did a 3x3k I think this year before on the Wednesday, and I remembered I did it in kind of non-carbon shoes, and yeah, Wednesday during the day, and the sun was out, and it like I felt really, really good. And I think at that point I was like, I'm good to go here. I'm excited. I'm fresh. I'm ready.
So you then had that workout on Wednesday. The race was on Sunday. The rest of that week, and I think this is like everyone start doubting themselves, right? Like that last week, it's like, oh, am I not doing enough? Like, should I do more? If you were to just quickly take us through that last week, in addition to that Wednesday, like from Monday and to Sunday, what is it that you do?
I think I just ran like an easy hour the first chunk of the week, and then towards the end I was down to like half an hour, 40 minutes on the Friday and the Saturday. I'm like, having been doing, 70, 80, 90-minute runs some days, going down to 40 minutes feels quite like, as you've got plenty in the tank. And I love it pre-Valencia when you're in that park and you're starting to see people, and yeah, you're beginning to get those nerves. But yeah, just, easy half an hour, I think I did the day before. And I didn't do anything crazy like strides. I maybe did a couple strides the day before. Yeah, that sort of thing. But I tried to stick to the routine as much as possible. I think there's definitely value in not changing too much. And I don't generally take rest days, so I didn't take any rest days beforehand.
Oh, cool. I love hearing this. Feel like it's pretty standard tapering, but I also think that people need to hear this, right? Like they need to hear that, okay, this is how a 212 marathoner did this, and if it works for you, it can work for them. Because I've heard of people who are just like starting to doubt themselves, and then they add a lot of running that last week just because they start feeling like they're losing fitness, right?
I honestly, I think it, like, had I not had the steering influence of my coach, I think I would 100% be guilty of that. But yeah, it helps to have the kind of sense check of checking what I'm set to do and just hitting it.
Yeah. Okay, so we're getting to the Sunday of Valencia. I just want us quickly to go through the race before we end the conversation. But one thing that I noticed in the photos, and I'm curious to hear more about, we talked about Tracksmith, but I noticed that you were wearing the Scotland kit when you were running in Valencia. How was, because I assume that is not something that you can just choose to do. It's probably something that you're given the opportunity to do or like honored with. What was that like?
I actually did just choose to wear it.
Oh, you did? Awesome. I
Yeah,
love
so
that.
I raced in that kit at the Antrim half marathon in like August, I think, of this year. And so I had the vest, and I decided to race in that one on the day. I did text my coach to ask if it was okay. He works for Scottish Athletics, so I figured that if
Okay,
he said,
cool.
yeah, you're fine to wear it, then I'd be okay.
Yeah, yeah. But does that give you more? Because I totally would have done the same thing. And I remember when I was a speed skater, if I could get my hands on like a national team suit, whether even if I hadn't like represented, but like I can tell you after I represented Norway, then yes, I was gonna wear that suit. But it kind of gave me so much more confidence. Uh, what was that like for you? Did you feel like more pride and more confidence on the start with Scotland on your chest, or why was it that you made that decision?
Honestly, yeah, I like the vest. I think it looks pretty good, and enjoyed having something that I could wear. That I was really proud of that, getting that vest at the half marathon in August, and so it was nice to rep Scotland and put that vest on in a foreign race. I think, I'd ran in a Tracksmith one at London that I still had, and I thought, yeah, I might wear that one, but because I did a rubbish day in it, I didn't want to wear the same one again. Um, and there's something to be said for going in with like just kind of all your good luck mantras and things in the right
Oh yeah,
place. So I decided to mix it up, and I was happy with that one.
cool. Yeah, no, I totally support that decision. So come race day, obviously a great end result. Did you have a good feeling throughout the whole race?
To be honest, yeah, it sounds weird to say, because but I think I knew 5k into the race, I was feeling pretty good. It's obviously weird because, you know, you're 5k in and you're tapered and you're fueled and you're hopefully in good shape as well. So obviously the first 5k should feel quite easy, but I think at that point I knew I felt decent, and yeah, throughout the race I think I just felt pretty positive all the way until, you know, it starts getting pretty hard beyond 30k. But yeah, I think I knew I was on for a good day from the get go. We did have, you know, a couple rough points in there. We got really lucky pace wise and group wise. So the official pacemakers had been announced, and there was a gap between the slowest male pacing group, which I think was like 64 flat or 64:30, and the quickest female pacing group, which was, I think, 2:20 was what they'd said on the broadcast. But then on the day, the leading two female athletes had their own personal pacemakers, and they came through and they did a chunk of the work for the group that I was running with, and they carried us through for a good chunk of it. And when they ran through, they were running really quick, and I think there was a like conscious decision to be made around then as to whether we continue running with them or if we set off. And I think had I not felt as good at that point, I would have backed off. But I think on the day, I'm glad I made that decision to go with, and I'm glad I felt good at that point because there was definitely, you know, a key decision.
Yeah. And you did mention that for London, or back in London, you were struggling for that last 10K. And you also talked about how Valencia has a more like downhill profile for the last 5K. How did you experience the last 10K in Valencia?
So I think I got to about 10k to go in Valencia, and I'd had quite a big move made between 25 and 30k. And so I was like working hard by the time I got to 10k to go. I had a really tough couple of minutes, maybe around 33, 34k, where I'd caught on to like some of the guys that were ahead of me on the road. But I think a lot of them had started with like the 208 or the 210 group, and they'd been having tough days. And so a few of them had been dropping out at the side of the course. And there's something about when a lot of people are around you and dropping out that you just don't feel as good. And I think that definitely, it played with me for maybe a minute or two around, yeah, I think 34k. And I just started not feeling great. And then I was like, I had to look at my watch where I split 35. And I'd still managed to stay on pace for that kind of that 5k segment. So I was like, oh, it's still on here. I'm still, you know, I'm still moving. I'm still feeling good. Everything's in the right place. I just have to stick with it. And, you know, this is the time that it's supposed to hurt. It's not supposed to feel easy. And all I got to do is just stick to the plan and really work hard here. And I still had guys ahead of me on the road that it really helped having, you know, bodies there to chase. And then I knew that kind of, I had a couple Ks more to run, and then it kind of goes downhill. And once you hit 40k, it's like the end's in sight. So I think that last 10k, it's a busy part of the course as well, which always helps. And then, yeah, the last 2k, you turn on to the kind of like last section and then onto the blue carpet. And around then, I had Connell, the guy that films the stuff. He was running alongside with his camera, and he was just screaming at me. And I think that was like so cool to have. And Molly, my girlfriend, she shouted at me with, I think, like 40 or 41k, like shouted the time at me. And I was like, I think I didn't hear what she said at the start, but I just heard her say 55. And I was like, oh, it's on. Like, wait, I could be good here. And I just knew I had to muscle it out for, yeah, a couple of K, and that was me.
And you touched on it in the beginning, but I want to ask you again, like crossing that finish line, 212, like, can you describe that feeling? And is it relief or just happiness?
I think it was, yeah, straight happiness. Just, yeah, I guess satisfaction that like a lot of the work that I put in, not just in the block, but in, you know, the past couple of years, kind of came to fruition that day. It is, yeah, it's cool. It was really nice. It was pretty much bang on the plan, which I recognise is like rare to happen in a marathon. And, you know, you can't always plan for the days to go quite as well as that one did. So I was just so happy and, yeah, fortunate that it went that way. But yeah, I think particularly post London, where it's you come off a bad one, and that, like, after finishing that day, honestly, the finish line at London was relief for the experience to be over. The last day, like, it's a contrast in terms of how the finish line feels. I was proud of, hammering through that race that day when it's not going your way, and I think there's something to be said for, getting through when it is really tough, and it makes the good days feel even better.
Yeah. Now, congrats again. I just like, I feel like it's I was thinking about it before we started talking, because I obviously have big goals and dreams for the marathon myself, and I was like, imagine running that fast. That's so cool. It's just yeah, must be great. How was it to come back to work after Valencia?
Oh, so I had a few days on the beach after the race. I took some holiday, and I took a couple of days, and I love the city. It's so nice. And yeah, nice to spend a bit of time in the sun. And I came back to work, and it was kind of reality hitting again. But it's a nice time of year. We had a couple of Christmas things going on, but straight back into the swing of things. Honestly, sometimes I think there's a bit of
But did they
help in
know
that.
about it?
Yeah, I'd spoken to like a couple of my workmates about it, and a couple of them asked me, how did it go? How was things? And yeah, it was really nice that people take interest in what you've got going on.
But I must assume that, like, because even for me, I'm a 2:47 marathoner, and if I get back to my clients and they ask me how it went, and I said, 2:47, they're like in shock. But here you are with your 2:12. When you get back to work and your colleagues, and they ask you how it went, and you say 2:12, are they not like shocked?
I think there's like a certain line in the sand that once you've ran faster than, it's like, it just generally is seen to be pretty fast. And so, like, I think if you run under
Yeah,
3 hours, it starts with a 2. You're doing pretty well. Um, so I think the coolest. I think having Alex E like 6 minutes ahead was one that I thought was quite cool. And I said that to someone at work, and they were like,
yeah,
he
that
asked
is
me how
cool.
for you Alex E, and I was like, yeah, 6 minutes, and he was like, oh, that's pretty good. And I was happy with that one.
Yeah. No, his performance there is just like, I think looking back at 2025, of all the sporting events that I've watched, I think that is like the coolest performance I've seen. Just insane.
I watched his YouTube video after as well, and it's like so inspiring because I think he's like a cool guy
Yeah,
and humble about his training and humble about his achievements in racing, and yeah, just a crazy talented athlete.
definitely. Hey Max, I really appreciate your time. So I only have one last question for you, and that is, what's next?
I think I will hopefully replicate the same tail end of the year next year, but yeah, maybe a bit of cross country in the next couple of months. I maybe a couple of 5Ks, 10Ks, and a half marathon to start off next year. But a bit of rest first. I think that's the first thing coming.
But do you have a goal, like also long term? Is it like something that you're kind of chasing?
It's hard to say. I think, yeah, of course I do. I think I want to run like a faster marathon. I think I'll be back at Valencia next year to hopefully chunk a few more minutes off. I'm ultimately, I think, a time goal. I don't know if I've got one yet. It's hard to say. I'm there's times that you put on, like, stick a sticky note on, and I honestly don't know where that is. I think I just need to see how I respond to the next year, 2 years, 4 years of training, and yeah, hope that everything goes well. But yeah, to be honest, I don't know. Maybe a fast marathon, that would be cool.
Oh, you already got that. So I'm excited to keep following you and see where you'll end up. But thank you so much for guesting the marathon podcast, and good luck and happy holidays.
Thanks, Christian. Thanks for your time. I've loved it.
Thank you so much, Max, for coming on. Really appreciate that. I'm very excited to see how fast Max will run in the future. I think that will be quite fast. And again, I was left with this feeling of just getting to know someone and appreciating that person, and just feeling like wanting to meet up, wanting to go for a run together. And I think that that is kind of the definition of a perfect guest for me, someone that I'm enjoying chatting with, and someone that I am ending up chatting up with even more after the podcast. And so Max was definitely one of those. And honestly, that's been the case with all of my guests. So to all of you coming on the Marathon Podcast in 2025, thank you so much. And to you for listening, thank you again. Thanks for trusting me with your time, because I know that your time is valuable. And yeah, I just really, really appreciate this, and I appreciate you. And I'll do my best to keep making good content in 2026. Happy New Year and happy running. You listen to the Marathon Podcast, brought to you by Wall Studio.